More Outnumbered in just a moment, but first to John Scott with what's coming up in the second hour of Happening Now. John?
Hey, Andrea. And in that next hour, Donald Trump says he will not appear at the Fox News debate tomorrow night in Iowa. Could it hurt his campaign? Charlie Hurt is here next. We'll play a little of Megyn Kelly's riveting interview with Rudy Giuliani as well. Plus, new video of Bernie Sanders arriving at the White House for a meeting with President Obama. Now, the president has seemed to be leaning Hillary Clinton's way in the race. Could Sanders convince the president to feel the burn? Plus, what might have been a tornado caused some damage today in Broward County, Florida. Cars tossed around like toys, at least one roof blown off. Rescue crews are working to find anyone who's injured. We're awaiting new details. We'll have them for you. Happening now. Andrea.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Can you really have it all? Well, that's the question usually geared towards working moms, but now young fathers are speaking out about how they're struggling to balance work and family life too. A new study is finding more than half are stressed about the balance. One father telling the Daily Mail, quote, "When my paternity leave was over, I didn't want to go back to the way it was. It was impossible to work full-time and spend time with my children during the week." The survey says some dads feel workplace culture still favors mothers, deterring them from using flexible policies in the same way. Now, we have a dad next to us who I think he's a hands-on dad. It's not just millennial dads, it's Gen X dads like you. Is this true? Do you feel stressed?
I think so. I still think I don't feel the same way toward paternity leave and maternity leave. I think I do view that differently. I think it doesn't have to be different, though.
Yeah.
But I'll say on the work-life balance, absolutely. I've, in fact, felt a growing sense of when I'm gone or traveling, like right now, not being there for those moments, especially now my kids are 5 and 3, and they're starting to really be attached.
And a baby.
Dad time, and a baby who's 4-month-old. I mean, it's hard. And I just think in a society where men have been more engaged in their families, but they're still traveling and still, as engaged in the work side, it tugs at you. And then you have a device at home. And you want to stay working, but you want to be engaged with your kids, and that creates even more tension. You just got to put it away.
Harris, you have a hands-on hubby as well that you're eating for lunch today.
I am.
Does he
can't wait for my lunch date.
Does he feel stressed out? Does he feel?
He is like the most calm person I know, so his stress level is usually not palpable. I don't know how he works that out, because if I'm stressed, the whole world knows, as y'all know. But if you'll allow me, I want to share something that Sandra and I have in common. We both have hubbies that work from home. And I think that makes a difference. So when he needs his guy time, I'll talk specifically about Tony because I don't know about John. But when he needs his guy time, and I really respect that, because it's like he's there when if somebody's sick home from school, he's there, he can do his business, he's got his devices and so on and so forth there at home. So it's a little bit different than leaving the home and both of you having to crowd that space if somebody gets sick and flux your schedules and all that kind of stuff. So we're really blessed in that sense. But I do respect the fact that every now and then, Daddy's got to roam.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, this is kind of a new phenomenon. I mean, a generation or two ago, there weren't as many husbands who would do that.
Yeah.
Andrea, what are your expectations for the future, Mr. Tantero?
I defer to Harris and Sandra. They are my idols on this issue because you guys do it so well, and you've got great husbands, and you inspire me every day, truthfully. You guys do, really. I think this is exactly what you said. More women are working. More women are in positions of power. They're rising through the ranks. We've got them right here on the show every single day. And it's forcing men to take more of a role at home. And Sheryl Sandberg is dead on when she talked about this. And she was the only one doing it. And sadly, so was her husband that passed away. Oh. And they were penning columns together in men's magazines, taking it to the men, saying, listen, guys, lean in at home. Help your wife out. Step in, because these men's magazines, they will give you 10 tips to pick up a hot woman at a bar, but they never give you tips on how to handle a successful one.
Oh,
and I think that's such an important thing with the rise of female power.
Preach it, girl!
Sandra, in the business world, it's interesting because Facebook, they've been doing
that. I have to cut in because we got to break in with breaking news. Forgive me, but Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders, outside the White House, just met with the president. Let's listen.
And Vice President Biden. The president and I discussed this morning a number of issues, foreign policy issues, domestic issues, occasionally a little bit of politics. But I enjoyed the meeting, and I thought it was a very positive and constructive meeting. We are right now, as everybody knows, in a very tough campaign in Iowa. Then we're going to New Hampshire. I think what the Iowa campaign ends up being about is one word, and that is turnout. We're feeling really good about where we are, and if there is a large voter turnout, I'm not saying we could do what Barack Obama did in 2008. I wish we could, but I don't think we can. But if there is a large turnout, I think we win. If not, I think we're going to be struggling. And then we go to New Hampshire, and we're going to fight as hard as we can for a week in New Hampshire, and I'm thinking we have a pretty good chance there. Then we're going to Nevada and South Carolina, and by the way, I think we're going to do a lot better in those states than people think we are. And then we head out to Super Tuesday. We were just in Minnesota yesterday. Had a phenomenal turnout in St. Paul. We had 15,000 people out in St. Paul. We had 6,000 people out in Duluth. We're feeling pretty good. So I think the American people, working people, young people, want to see real movement in this country, and I think we are tapping into that energy, and I think we stand a very good chance to do well in Iowa and forward.
Did you ask the president's endorsement?
No, of course not. What the president has tried to do, what Vice President Biden has tried to do, is to be as even-handed as they can be. And I know there was some discussion the other day about a Politico interview where he was tipping the scale towards Secretary Clinton. I don't believe that at all. I think he and the Vice President have tried to be fair and even-handed in the process, and I expect they will continue to be that way.
Did he give you any advice for how you beat Hillary Clinton?
No.
Were there any points of disagreement with the president today?
Look, let me, I think everybody knows that for the last 7 years, well, before that, Barack Obama, when he was the United States Senator, was kind enough to come to Vermont and campaign for me, and I've never forgotten that. In 2008, I did my best to see that he would be elected president, campaigned hard for him, as I did in 2012. But it is also no secret that we have, as is the case in a democratic society, we have differences of opinion. I was on the floor of the Senate for 8.5 hours in disagreement with him over taxes. We disagree over the TPP. But by and large, over the last 7 years, on major issue after major issue, I have stood by his side where he has taken on unprecedented Republican obstructionism and has tried to do the right thing for the American people.
Is your campaign going to go negative against Hillary Clinton?
What did you ask of the president? Did you respect any requests? Or?
No. It was just a discussion to just get myself updated on some of the current issues facing this country, how we most effectively deal with ISIS, his assessment about Iran, and how we work with Iran and our relationship with Iran. That's what it was about.
Do you think Hillary Clinton?
I'm sorry.
Was there anybody else in the meeting?
No.
Do you think Hillary Clinton is overplayed for closeness with the White House and with President Obama?
I think the people of Iowa will make that decision in a few days. I don't.
What do you talk about Flint, Michigan?
Flint,
Michigan, sir. How would you tackle the threat of ISIS differently than how this president and this administration?
Look, frankly, and we did talk about this. As you all know, I voted against the war in Iraq. And that's a major point of difference between Secretary Clinton and myself. We both received the same information and we came to a different conclusion. And as I mentioned to the President, I, in my small state of Vermont, went to too many funerals of wonderful young people. And I'm very happy to tell you that in the last few years I have not gone to funerals of young men or women in our military. I think what the President is trying to do is the right thing. And what he is trying to do is keep our young men and women in the military out of a perpetual war in the quagmire of the Middle East. And what he is trying to do, and what I will try to do, is put together a coalition of the major powers with the Muslim people on the ground, the Muslim nations, Muslim troops. Because at the end of the day, as King Abdullah recently reminded us, this is a war for the soul of Islam against people like ISIS and their barbarity that has hijacked that religion. And what Abdullah reminds us is that at the end of the day, it must be the Muslim people and their military to destroy ISIS with the support of the major powers in the country, and I think that's what the president is trying to do. Okay, we got to get going. Thank you very much.
Participate in the February 4th debate.
Senator Bernie Sanders doing what Hillary Clinton had done, and that was meeting with President Obama. We did not know exactly what they talk about. Now we know what they did discuss. He said a little bit of politics, economic and foreign policy. He said, I think the Iowa campaign ends up being about one word, turnout. He says, I don't think we can do what Obama did in 2008. You know, what's interesting about all this is he did get asked at the point, did you ask the president for his endorsement? No, of course not. Did you ask the president how to beat Hillary Clinton was one of the things he was asked. He didn't answer that. He just laughed hysterically. He's looking forward to Super Tuesday and beyond that. As we come out real quickly, we're going to wrap the show, but just a quick thought. Anybody?
He made a forecast. He's going to win Iowa.
Yes, that's true.
If anyone has the playbook to beat Hillary Clinton, it's Barack Obama, but he needs Bernie Sanders supporters not to be mad at him. He wants Bernie not to shoot at his legacy, and Bernie needs President Obama not to shoot at him and legitimize him.
Our hashtag one lucky guy.
Thank you. Interesting to watch him invoke 2008 outside the White House. He's hoping for that same magic.
And